Whether you're trying to get a raise, pick a restaurant for dinner, or launch a world-changing idea, persuasion is, well, it's one of the most fundamental human skills we have. It's the engine of business, it's the heart of leadership, and really, it's the key to just being heard. So the big question is, how do we get better at it? Let's break down the timeless art and the modern science of how to convince anyone.
You know that feeling, right? It's so frustrating. You've got a great idea, you've laid out your argument perfectly, but it just doesn't land. It feels like you're talking to a brick wall. You're left wondering, what did I do wrong? How do I make my message actually stick? Well, it turns out there's both an ancient art and a modern science to making that happen.
To really understand this, we have to go back, way back. We're talking over 2,000 years ago to ancient Greece. This is where the philosopher Aristotle basically wrote the first ever playbook on persuasion. And you know what? The foundational pillars he came up with are just as powerful today.
So Aristotle gave us this brilliant model. He called it the rhetorical triangle. And his argument was simple. Any truly persuasive message needs a balance of three things: ethos, which is your credibility, logos, your logic, and pathos, your emotional connection. Think of it like a three-legged stool. If one of those legs is wobbly, the whole thing just falls right over.
Let's break this down a bit. Ethos is all about trust. It's the "why should I listen to you" question. Logos is the nuts and bolts, the rational case. Does your argument actually hold water? And then there's pathos, the appeal to emotion, which, let's be honest, is often the most powerful driver of them all. Now yeah, the kitten example here is a little over the top, but you get the point. To be truly persuasive, you have to make your audience feel something.
Okay, let's jump in our time machine and fast forward a couple of millennia. Aristotle gave us the what of persuasion, but modern psychology, that gives us the why. It really digs into the weird little shortcuts our brains use to make decisions, and it reveals exactly why we're so wired to say yes.
Look, we're bombarded with information all day long. So, to cope, our brains create these little mental shortcuts to avoid getting totally overwhelmed. And the master of decoding these shortcuts is Dr. Robert Cialdini, who's basically known as the godfather of influence. He spent his entire career on this, and we're about to explore 4 of his most powerful principles.
First up, reciprocity. You know this one. When someone gives you something for free, a sample at the grocery store, a helpful piece of advice, you feel this deep, almost unconscious urge to give something back. It's a really powerful way to build goodwill and, open the door for a request later on.
Oh, and then there's scarcity. Limited time offer, only 3 left in stock. We see these everywhere, and they work because we are fundamentally wired with a fear of missing out. When we think something is rare or about to disappear, our desire for it just skyrockets. It creates this undeniable sense of urgency.
Next, we have social proof. This is the everybody's doing it principle. When we're not sure what to do, what's our first instinct? We look around to see what everyone else is doing. Why do we trust a restaurant with 5,000 positive reviews? Because if that many people say it's good, it feels like a safe bet. It's like we're outsourcing our decision to the crowd.
And finally, authority. We are just hardwired to trust people we see as experts. A recommendation from a doctor, a study from a big university, an endorsement from someone we respect, all of that carries enormous weight. Even just the symbols of authority, like a title or a uniform, can make a message instantly more persuasive.
Okay, so we've got Aristotle's appeals and Cialdini's psychological triggers. But how do our brains actually process all this stuff when it's coming at us? Well, it turns out we have 2 very different ways of being persuaded.
This is where something called the elaboration likelihood model comes in, which is just a fancy way of saying there are 2 paths to persuasion. On one side, you have the central route. This is for an audience that's engaged, motivated, and really thinking about what you're saying. They're weighing your logic. Get them on board, and you create lasting change. But on the other side is the peripheral route. This is for a distracted or maybe just less invested audience. They're not focused on your arguments, they're focused on superficial stuff like how confident you sound or how much they like you. The big takeaway here? You have to know your audience and choose the right route.
So, knowing all these psychological principles is huge, but it's only half the battle. Now, we need to talk about how you actually structure your argument. Let's look at 2 really powerful blueprints for guiding your audience all the way from, interesting, to a definite yes.
First up is a classic, Monroe's motivated sequence. It's a 5-step blueprint that just works. You start by grabbing their attention, maybe a shocking statistic or a great story. Then you establish a real need, making the problem feel urgent and personal. Next, you satisfy that need with your clear solution. Then, the magic step, visualization. You help them picture what success looks like. And finally, you give them a clear, simple call to action, one specific thing they can do right now.
And listen, this isn't just some dusty academic theory. This is the exact formula that people who persuade for a living, especially advertisers, use every single day. Once you see it, you'll start noticing it in almost every commercial you watch. It works because it follows the natural way our brains are moved to act.
Now, here's another amazing framework called StoryBrand, and it completely flips the script. It says the most important thing to remember is you are not the hero of the story. Your customer is. They're the character facing a problem. You are the wise guide, think Yoda or Dumbledore, who gives them a plan and calls them to action so they can win the day. By making them the hero, you make the story all about them, and that is incredibly persuasive.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about preparing your message, but what about persuasion in real time? You know, in the middle of an actual conversation. This is where we get into some really interesting, high-stakes tactics. Let's talk about Chris Voss. This guy was the FBI's former lead international hostage negotiator. So when he talks about persuasion, yeah, you want to listen. And his whole philosophy is completely counterintuitive. He says great negotiation isn't about being aggressive or dominating the conversation. It's about great collaboration.
Voss's tactics are all about building what he calls trust-based influence. For example, labeling is just calling out an emotion you see. Saying something like, "It seems like you're frustrated with this," can instantly diffuse tension. Or my favorite, mirroring. You just repeat the last 1 to 3 words someone said. So if they say, "I'm really struggling with this deadline," you just say, "With this deadline?" It sounds almost too simple to work, but it makes people feel so heard that they just keep talking.
This right here is one of the most powerful distinctions from Voss. Think about it. When we say you're right, it's often a way to just end the conversation and make the other person go away. But the magic happens when you can get them to say, "That's right." That's the breakthrough. That's the moment they signal that you truly, deeply understand them. And that's when they become open to your influence.
And remember, the words you say are only one part of the message. Your nonverbal cues, your posture, your tone of voice, your facial expressions are constantly broadcasting what you're really thinking. And the impact is massive. Get this. One study found that a face-to-face request is 34 times more successful than the exact same request made over email. 34 times. Why? Because real trust and connection are built through more than just text on a screen.
Wow, okay. We've covered a lot of ground here, from Aristotle's ancient Greece to modern FBI tactics. So let's bring it all home. How do we take all these powerful tools and use them not just effectively, but ethically?
This is so important. Robert Cialdini himself is always stressing that these principles are tools, not weapons. Used ethically, they can build bridges, foster amazing collaborations, and create win-win situations for everybody. But if they're used deceptively, they just become manipulation. The goal should always be genuine influence, not trickery.
So now you have a powerful toolkit. It's been built from thousands of years of rhetoric and decades of deep psychological research. From Aristotle's triangle to Cialdini's principles, these tools can absolutely help you get your ideas heard and acted on. The final question, as this slide asks, isn't whether or not they work. We know they do. It's how will you choose to use them.